Alright, so today is the 18th of July, 2018, and I'm just heading off on my bike commute to work today. If you've recently just discovered this channel, bike commuting videos are a video format that I've been filming for quite a few years now. I think I did my first one back in 2013. The format is such that I have an action camera mounted on the front of my bike here, and while I'm riding I have an earpiece microphone in my ear, and as I'm riding I'm narrating and describing the things which are around me. Given that that's the format, these videos are inherently less polished, you could say, than some of the newer content I've been producing for my bike trip series, for example. And these videos are also a lot longer form. They're filmed in real time. I generally don't do too much editing of the clips. I try and keep the video such that it gives the viewer the experience that they're riding along here with me. So just sit back and relax and imagine yourself riding another bike right next to me as we, have a conversation on this bike ride. So this road I'm coming up here is called Poplar Plains. It's a common cycling route heading north. I started the ride a little bit before where I turned the camera on, down at the Annex of downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So this is a one-way street, Poplar Plains. It's a nice big bike lane, and the other lane over to my left is heading in the same direction as where I'm going. Most people that bike commute, or I shouldn't say most, but certainly more people in Toronto bike commute downtown from, the, not just the suburbs, but the areas that are north of the downtown, or east of the downtown, or west of the downtown. People that live in those areas, many of them have employment in the downtown sector, so they would be riding in the opposite direction as what I'm doing right now. I'm different though, because I work at an office which is actually outside the Toronto city limits. This is my first time actually showing my newest, or my current commute. For years I worked at the same office in the North York Centre, the Yonge and Sheppard area of North York, until I guess about 6 months ago, maybe a little more, that the company that I worked for decided to close that office, and they opened another one that's not even in Toronto. It's in a municipality called Richmond Hill. So that meant that my commuting distance changed from 12 kilometers to about 32 kilometers. But thankfully, the company is very flexible with letting me work from home. So this route I'm showing you today is my commute, but it's not my daily commute. It's actually only the fourth time that I've taken this route on my bike. In the winter I was commuting, when I did go to the office I was commuting, taking public transit, but since the weather got nicer and the roads became, better suited for my bike, I've been doing this on my bike. The time to get there is pretty similar from, either taking transit or riding my bike. And I will apologize for, I guess, the sun, just because right now I'm riding pretty well due east, and it's just a little bit after 7 a.m. in the morning right now, and the sun's quite low in the sky, so basically riding right into the sun. So I'm sure it obstructs quite a bit of the video, but the majority of my ride, well, it's a combination of going north and going east, and of course the sun will rise higher in the sky as I do this whole ride. So right here I'm at Avenue Road on Poplar Plains. I made a right turn onto Balmoral Avenue, which runs east, and I'm going to be taking Balmoral for another stretch here until I get to the next busy street, which is called Yonge Street, and then I'll change roads again. But yeah, I just got a little bit of, okay, it's a red light, but there's a walk signal, so I think that's because I didn't, oh, there is the green. Thought maybe it's because my bike didn't have enough metallic content in it to trigger the traffic light switch, but it just seems to be a little bit of delay between when the pedestrians get to go and the vehicles. Yeah, this is Balmoral Avenue. So yeah, I left this morning just a little bit before 7 a.m. Typically start work at around 9 o'clock, and the bike ride takes me not quite 2 hours, less than 2 hours, but once I get to work I still need to, clean myself off a little bit and change into my clothes for work. Another difference between this office and the other office that I worked at before is that the other office had a beautiful showering facility in it that no one in my company other than me took advantage of, so I had a private shower there at work, which was really nice. But so what I would do is I'd wake up in the morning and I'd get up and go, eat my breakfast at home and do that kind of stuff, but I wouldn't take my shower until after I had finished my commute, because if you can help it, you'd rather shower off after you've done your workout. But of course, if you don't have that available to you, you can get away with, bike commuting without having a shower. I've done that many times too. So I'm just crossing Yonge Street here, and I'm making a left turn onto a road called, or right turn onto a road called Rose Hill Avenue, which takes me past the Rose Hill Reservoir, or part of it at least. Again, it might be difficult for you to be able to see much of what I'm doing for the next little stretch here, just because we are heading straight into that sun, and even me wearing my sunglasses, I'm finding it's a little bit hard to see. You just try to adjust the camera here a little bit. See, probably focusing down would make it a little bit better. Hard to say. Yeah, so this over here on our right hand side, on the other side of that green fence, or green construction barricade, that's the Rose Hill Reservoir. So yeah, my new workplace does not have a shower, so what that means is that when I get to work, I need to kind of mop some of the sweat up on me. I use some soap too to clean myself as well. So it's almost like a little mini sponge bath that I give to myself there in the restroom. Again, not ideal, but it does work, and the alternative would be to not ride my bike to work, so certainly don't want to do that. So that's what I make do with. All right, so Rose Hill Avenue curved, which actually changed and became Avoca Avenue. But now I'm arrived at St. Clair Avenue. I'm gonna make a right turn and continue riding east along St. Clair. Again, heading directly into the sun. Like I said, I do have the camera tilted down a little bit now, which might make it a little bit better. This camera does not have a viewfinder on it, so I don't get to see what the clips look like until after I have completed filming the clip and I get back home. So as I was mentioning there at the beginning of the video, most of the posts to my channel, or actually all of the posts to my channel, basically since May, have been from my my bike trip that I did in rural Ontario. And that was a 9-part video series. 9 days of the trip. Each day had its own video. And I filmed those videos while I was on the trip, or I filmed all the clips on the trip. But I then spent the next almost 2 months editing those videos and producing the content that is posted there now. I wouldn't say it's the actual editing that took the most amount of time. Really, it's the narrating of those videos. Because essentially what I had done each day while I was on the trip is I had a camera, not the camera that I'm using now, it was a handheld digital camera, and I kept it in the pocket of my shirt while I was riding. And as I was riding along, whenever I saw something interesting, or whenever I made a turn, or whenever there was reason to do so, I would take out my camera in my hand and I'd hold it and I'd film. And I'd shoot all these little clips in a given day. There might be anywhere from 200 to maybe 350 clips, depending on the day. And then I would edit those down. And the footage from those clips in each day often totaled about 45 minutes. Now, some of that footage is really shaky and unusable. Because again, I was filming this using my handheld camera. So I go over a bump and I'm holding the camera, my arm bounces up too. So that's kind of shaky. But there's also, like duplicate clips. I'll shoot something on the road and then, 500 meters down the road, I'd see the same sort of scenery that I just seen, but now it's better. So I would use the better clip of the two. So, just this work consisted of me, just editing my clips down to the 12 or so minutes, 12 to 13 minutes that each clip is. That didn't take so long. What took the most time was the narration, figuring out, looking at the clips and saying to myself, okay, what am I going to say here? Like, how do I summarize what I'm looking at here? Or what anecdote from my trip can I share? Just basically trying to get trying to fit those clips into a story that I'm telling as I'm riding. And, because the clips because the videos themselves were about 12 minutes and I was trying to summarize an entire day, there was days when it was really hard to try and, try and get all the content, all the stories that I had, try and fit them all into the video. I'm just turning right onto, it's called Millwood Road, I think it's called. Again, we're heading kind of in the east direction again. So yeah, some days it was a challenge of being able to squeeze everything in, because I wanted these videos to be, the length that they are. I didn't want them to be super long. I wanted them to be, you know, after all, just one day of riding. It's only, you know, 100 kilometers typically around somewhere in there, that neighborhood of riding. There's only so long you can hold an attention span of a person. But other days it was more a problem of not really having enough to talk about. Like I'd have, you know, let's say 15 kilometers worth of me riding somewhere, but the road I was riding on was just a straight flat road with, you know, no interesting towns or villages or anything to talk about. And then it would be like, well, I got all these clips I show. The scenery is kind of interesting, but, you know, I don't have any commentary to go along with these. So, you know, it's a matter of, well, I don't really want to throw out all this footage. I don't want to omit this part from my video because, you know, after all, I'm trying to document the whole trip, and if there's a part that's just not that interesting, I should still include it. So, you know, it was just always a challenge trying to marry up the commentary with the clips that I had available. But it really, truly was a labor of love. I mean, it had to be, because it was a big project that I undertook. Alright, so I'm just crossing over Bayview Avenue. The road I'm riding on is called Moore Avenue, not Millwood. I get my roads confused sometimes. And soon we'll be turning and no longer heading east. So you won't have to put up with that sun for too much longer here. And probably the next time, well, I won't make any predictions, but I'm gonna get some water to drink. When I was leaving home, the temperature, at least my outdoor thermometer in my apartment, said 20 degrees Celsius. And the temperature forecast is only supposed to go up to 23 Celsius today. That kind of surprises me a bit, considering that it's a clear sky day with, you know, lots of sunshine so far. The temperatures in Toronto for the last, feels like 3 weeks now, probably less. Well, I mean, because there's a break somewhere in there, but they've been very warm along the way. Like, it's been a lot of days when the temperature's been, you know, in the, you know, hovering around 30 degrees Celsius with a lot of humidity too. Toronto gets a lot of humidity in the summer, and the weather forecast will often give you the temperature, but the main focus of the weather report is usually what it feels like. You know, because they factor in the humidity. So let's say, you know, it's forecasted to be 30 degrees Celsius, but it actually feels like 36 degrees Celsius with the humidity. Which I always thought is kind of silly because, well, I mean, humidity is absolutely a factor of the temperature. Humidity is the amount of moisture in the air, and when the air is very moist, then sweat does not evaporate off you very quickly, or very much at all, so that makes things feel a lot warmer. The camera just keeps the vibrations, it's sort of tipping down. Got to keep remembering to knock it back up. So yeah, when sweat does not evaporate off you very effectively, then it feels a lot hotter. But anyway, the reason I think it's silly is because if you live in, you know, I mean, it doesn't make sense if you're traveling around to lots of different cities and you're not used to humidity, but for someone like me who's lived in Toronto almost his entire life, you know, usually in the summer when it's 30 degrees Celsius, you anticipate that there's going to be some humidity in there too. So 30 degrees Celsius to me feels like 30 degrees Celsius. It doesn't feel like, you know, 36 or whatever they say, because I never get to experience 36 degrees Celsius dry heat. Just waiting for this traffic light to cross, to cross. It's not, doesn't seem to be detecting my bike, so I'm going to have to jump the gun here a little bit, I think, once the way is clear. Alrighty then. Many of our traffic lights in Toronto have an embedded detector in the asphalt. At least for a road like that, where you've got a major road crossing a major road. On those roads, the traffic light always stays green for the major road until a vehicle comes along to cross it, and the traffic light detects that there's a vehicle there, and then it will eventually change the traffic light for the person to be able to cross. But some of the detectors, well, I believe in Toronto they did some kind of a program like 10 years ago where they're supposed to make all those sensors so they could detect bikes, and they're supposed to put these little white dots on the pavement to show where the bikes are supposed to wait for them. And a lot of the ones downtown have the white dots and they do detect bikes, but out here in the less common cycling areas, they don't seem to always work the way that they're intended to work. So often you have to end up doing what I just did there to get across. Alright, so we turn right onto McCrae Road, I think it's called. This area we've been passing through here in the last 10 minutes or so, this is known as Leaside. Just approaching Laird Drive here. So I'm going to cross over. So as I said, my commute to work is about 32 kilometers or so. For city riding with all the traffic lights and stop signs and things, that typically takes me a little less than 2 hours, maybe an hour and 45 minutes. Again, really depends on the traffic lights more than anything. And I'm not sure that the battery in my camera will be able to last for that entire distance, so this video is going to film until it runs out of batteries, and then I will strive to complete the video at some point in the future. This camera is now, I think 5 years old. I think I got it in 2013 in the summer. It's 2018 now. So it's 5 years old, and it's been used in a lot of videos. I filmed an awful lot with this camera over the years, and as such, the camera battery has been through so many cycles, and it's not a replaceable, not a chargeable battery. It's a waterproof camera, underwater camera. Actually, the camera can be used underwater, which means that the battery is buried deeply inside behind the waterproof seals and not designed to be changed. And I wouldn't attempt to tear it apart to change it, because that would probably ruin the waterproof capabilities of the camera. This road I'm on here is called Brentcliff Road. Now we're just approaching Eglinton Avenue, so we've gone quite a bit east, as well as north, but more north than east, but a lot more further east than I would have gone on my former commute. My former commute was mostly north, up to the Yonge and Sheppard area. So we're heading east on Eglinton Avenue now, heading down the big hill. There's construction over on our right hand side. That's part of the Eglinton Crosstown, which is an infrastructure transit project. It's been going on since I moved to Toronto, and it's still going to be under construction for many years. It's an LRT project, a light rail train, which is running along Eglinton Avenue. The portion of it which is in the center of the city, like right downtown, which essentially ends right here, that section is going to be underground. So they have the LRT buried below the street, and then out in the less densely populated areas on either side of the downtown core in, East Toronto and Etobicoke, or the west end of Toronto. Gonna go in this left turn lane here. It's gonna be above ground, at grade. So it's gonna be in the middle lanes of the road. So downtown it will function much like a subway, and out in the suburbs it'll function like a traditional LRT, light rail transit vehicle. Never really know what the best way to cross this intersection is. There is a pedestrian crosswalk at this intersection. I have to make a left turn here, as I said, but there is a pedestrian crosswalk which I can do, and I can do like a 2-stage left, but today I decided to try this one instead. I'm going to be riding on the sidewalk here because this is a narrow road, and I'm going to be riding uphill for the next section here. This is what my friend from North York calls the concrete bike lane. So we're just heading north again. This road here is Leslie Street. And very shortly we'll be getting off this road and getting onto an off-road trail, or a multi-use pathway which runs parallel to this. It's actually a former railway. And what I'm riding on right now is what one of my friends from North York would call the concrete bike lane, also known as the sidewalk, because in North York and a lot of the suburban areas of Toronto, or they don't have bike lanes, they just have these big major thoroughfares like Leslie Street, where it's not really particularly safe to ride your bike right on the road, many people ride their bikes on the sidewalks instead. And there aren't an awful lot of pedestrians that use these sidewalks, so they're more used like a concrete bike lane than a sidewalk in a lot of areas. There certainly are some challenges and safety concerns, though, of riding on sidewalks, and certainly not something that I'd recommend doing in a lot of areas. It really is very case-by-case specific where it makes sense or where it's safe to ride on a sidewalk. The danger is driveways, or I guess driveways, driveways into people's houses, driveways into into plazas and things, stores. People are coming and going, and they're crossing the sidewalk before they're crossing the road, and they're expecting a pedestrian to be walking slowly, not a bike to go whizzing through. So if you're ever riding your bike on a sidewalk, just be aware of that. Anytime you're crossing a driveway, you do technically have the right of way. At least you do if you're a pedestrian. But as a bike, you're technically not supposed to be using the side. Oh, I mean, it depends on the jurisdiction. Just heading under this little fence here. Depends on the jurisdiction. But generally, at least in Ontario, or certainly in Toronto, it's illegal to ride on the sidewalk unless you're below a certain age. So as such, you're in the wrong when you're doing it, which means that you need to yield to any vehicles that are, crossing the sidewalk, because you can't guarantee that they're gonna slow down and stop when you're crossing. So I believe this is called the Leslie Street Spur Trail. It's got a couple different names, or it's had a couple names over the years. I don't know what the current name for it is, but as I said, it's a former rail trail. The place where I got onto it is a pathway through an old industrial site, some kind of factory. I believe that was the factory where they made Wrigley gum, chewing gum, which is no longer there. But that trail used to just dead end near where that fence is that I came under. Or officially it would dead end, but someone cut their way through the fence, and I think the city's actually made that, an official, not an official part of the trail, but they've certainly allowed people to ride on it. They haven't patched the fence up or anything like that. I remember riding along this trail for the very first time, probably the first summer when I moved to Toronto, just kind of exploring around and going, oh, what's this thing? And just riding along here and sniffing and going, and being able to smell like a very strong minty flavor. And I was like, what is that? Why does that smell like mint? And I took out the phone that I had at the time, which was a BlackBerry Bold, and was looking on the map on the device, just looking around, saying, what could that be coming from? And then seeing the Wrigley factory on the map, thinking, oh, that's chewing gum that they're making there. So this is a nice part of the route, being here sheltered from the sun, and I guess the wind too. Not that I really notice the wind too much riding in the city. Wind is a very big factor when you're riding out in the country, but in the city, at least in my city where the roads are narrow and you know, the buildings block out most of the wind. You know, when I used to do my daily commute back and forth to work each day, I really didn't notice the wind one day from another. It's just, like, you might notice it was windy, but you wouldn't notice the direction of the wind. So we're still in North York now. North York is part of the city of Toronto, and the boundary between the old city of Toronto and North York, it's not a straight line. It's not simple where the border between the two is. And that's because you know, Toronto has been amalgamated many times over the years. Just little parts were added onto it. So in the middle of Toronto, around near, you know, Yonge Street, centered around there, North York actually, or the city of Toronto, used to go almost all the way up to Yonge Boulevard. That was all part of the former city of Toronto. Whereas in other areas, North York started down at Eglinton, or even south of Eglinton. But now that the city was amalgamated back in 1998, it is technically all part of Toronto, but the different parts of the city report to different community councils. There's a North York Community Council where they meet on local North York issues, as well as Toronto, downtown Toronto is part of community councils called Toronto East York. So Toronto and Old City of Toronto and East York are grouped together. And then there's a Etobicoke and a Scarborough. Sorry, it's called Etobicoke York Community Council, and then Scarborough Community Council. So I just back there crossed Lawrence Avenue East. Lawrence Avenue is an east-west road that runs through much of Toronto, although it's not continuous. Lawrence Avenue, I was going to say Lawrence Avenue East and Lawrence Avenue West are not connected, but that's not entirely true, because there is a portion of Lawrence Avenue East that is just on the other side of Yonge Street that is connected with, Yonge Street is the divider between East and West. But there's a big section of Lawrence Avenue East which does not exist because there's a big valley. So it starts and then it ends and then it opens up, it stops at Bayview and then it starts again somewhere south of Leslie Street. So those things at the intersections there, that's sort of memorializing the railway. They'll put up, things, train tracks into the road, things like that to remind you that there was once a railroad here. They also have those things at the intersections there because people do tend to ride pretty fast along these because it's a very long, straight, flat trail. So, people will go zooming on their bikes or mostly just bikes that would go fast because any motorized vehicles are not allowed on these trails. But then it, basically it makes a crossing for people, so it's kind of like a traffic circle to slow people down when they're coming the other direction. This last little part of the trail here was just added, 2 or 3 years ago. It's pretty new to me, at least. It certainly wasn't here that first time that I came and rode this trail. The time that I was describing where I discovered the Wrigley Gum Factory. So time now is around 7:40 in the morning. So I'm not quite halfway to work yet. Generally the halfway point is when I get to Highway 401. Which is still a ways up ahead. I certainly feel like I'm not setting any speed records today. Just kind of taking it easy. I guess I find that when I'm narrating a video, I ride slower than I do when I'm just doing my regular commute. Just doing a regular bike ride. So I do have another bike trip planned, which I'm really looking forward to, and actually, likely by the time you see this video, I will have already completed that bike trip, but because today is the 18th of July that I'm filming this, and I'll be completing that bike trip, I'll be starting that bike trip 2 days from now, on the 20th of July. And this bike trip for me is going to be very similar to the one that I filmed back in May. It's a rural Ontario ride. I won't say too much about it, because I do plan on filming some videos of it, although the videos will not be the same, well, they won't be in exactly the same format as the clips that or the videos that I published for my May bike trip. But there will be a video of some form, or at least that's my goal. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. I'm planning on, camping in more provincial parks along the way. I'll tell you more about that in a moment, but right here we're just going to be crossing over a railway bridge. So we were riding there along that rail trail, which actually rides right next to a current rail corridor. So now to get over top of that railway, we came briefly over here onto, this is York Mills Avenue. So we're heading east along York Mills, just so we can get over top of that set of railway tracks. This bridge here was reconstructed around the same time that trail we were just on was built. And when they did it, they added in this painted bike lane, which is certainly an improvement over what used to be here. York Mills is a fairly busy arterial though, and many argue that some kind of a protected bike lane would be more appropriate for that crossing. So now I'm going to make another left here onto Les Mill Road, which will rejoin me with a section of the trail. Now it's a different trail. This one's called the Betty Sutherland Trail that we're going to be getting onto soon. But these trails are intended to be linked together. In fact, a lot of this route that I'm on is part of a continuous, well, it's not completely continuous, but eventually should be continuous route called the Lake to Lake route. Testing? Okay. Having a little difficulty with my microphone there for a second. The Lake to Lake route is a route which connects together Lake Ontario with Lake Simcoe, which is a lake which is northeast of Toronto, and it spans through the city of Toronto and then through the region which is north of Toronto, which is called York Region, which is made up of a number of municipalities. So they have this goal of having a safe cycling route which connects Lake Simcoe to Lake Ontario, and it's mostly, connecting together existing trails and building trails where trails didn't exist before to be able to make it happen. Alright, so here you can see the sign, to Betty Sutherland Trail, 300 meters, turning right onto Duncan Mill Road, and we have to make a left shortly onto this little trail. This trail actually goes right underneath the Highway 401. So, here's our entrance into Betty Sutherland. Making a left turn here. So yeah, on my YouTube channel I've got all kinds of videos showing my daily commutes over the years. When I first started making these videos, really the idea was that I kind of wanted to show people that you can ride your bike to work. It's really not that, not that difficult. And not only that you could do it, but also that you could do it year round. I mean, I live in Toronto, and in the winter we get a lot of snow. Not as much snow as other places, like, either other places in Canada or other major cities around the world, but we get snow, and we get ice, and we get cold, so, when I used to, have a commute to work, a daily commute, at least a reasonably short commute, I used to do it every day, even in the winter, even in the snow, even in the ice. And the idea was, let's start making some videos showing my commute, and let's make them all year round and make one every month. So I started in September of 2013. So I rode to work in September, and then, the next month was October, and it was a little bit colder in October, and the leaves on the trees were changing, and I thought, let's make another video showing what it's like to ride in October. So I did that too. And then I did November, and I'm not sure whether I did one in December, but the goal was to do them every month, and I definitely did. I very distinctly remember doing one in the February following that original September, where it was just, I picked the snowiest day possible, where there was just been snowing all day long and just mountains of snow that I was riding through. And again, I rode it on my bike, and the thing was, I wanted to show you that if you really want to ride your bike to work in the snow, you can do it. Again, or at least I can do it. My commute at the time was about 8 kilometers, so that was doable. I can't imagine riding my bike to work in snow with this 32 kilometer commute that I have now. One of the things with snow is that it really slows you down. You know, you're riding through a big mountain of snow, your back tire just spins a lot of the time. You know, it's only gripping on some of the time. Even with studded tires, which I have been using for many years. Not only that, given my current commute, it includes a lot of these trails, a lot of these trail routes, like I'm on right now. In Toronto, the city does not maintain most of their trails throughout the year. They don't plow these roads or these trails. So if snow falls, the snow's going to stay there until it melts. So that makes riding year-round on trails pretty difficult. So we're just crossing underneath Highway 401 now. I'd say this is certainly a better highway crossing than what I used to ride on my daily commute back to Yonge and Shepherd. It's just a nice trail, completely separate from traffic. Another challenge with me riding my bike in the winter now is that for the last, I guess, year and a half, I've been riding almost exclusively recumbent bikes. And I don't ride recumbents because I think they make me cool or I think that they're really cool bikes. I ride them because I'm pretty well, that's my only option right now. I have carpal tunnel in my hands and wrists, and riding a conventional bike, I get a lot of pain there, and after riding through the pain for many years, it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and when your body's telling you something, you gotta listen sometimes. So I decided to stop riding a conventional bike, switch to recumbents, and well, as you saw, I rode this recumbent that I'm riding right now on a 9-day trip, about 900 kilometers over 9 days, and my wrists and hands were completely fine the entire trip. I didn't have any soreness in my hands or my wrists the entire trip, and I'm certain that if I had ridden a conventional bike, that would not have been the case. And yes, there are all kinds of things you can do to a conventional bike to, adjustments you can make to it, a higher stem, a, different shape of handlebars. Believe me, I've tried it all. But with an underseat steering recumbent bike, my hands are just dangling up my sides and I don't really need to grip on anything, and I can ride all day, as I said, without discomfort in my hands and wrists. But anyways, as I was saying, unfortunately, riding a recumbent bike in the winter does not work very well because of the position you're in. You're sitting, you're leaning backwards, and often let me just say, right now it's not really an option for me, or doesn't really work very well. Maybe I'll develop better technique in the future, but at least in my experience, it hasn't gone. I don't believe it will go well, because if you go back and watch that February commuting video, February of 2014, riding through the big snow event, I just remember it. I'm standing up a lot of the way. I'm trying to keep my bike from sliding out from under me. Just staying on my bike is a huge challenge, and I'm really having to shift my weight a lot to keep the bike from fishtailing. And on a recumbent, you just don't have that kind of flexibility. You're sitting, you're leaning back. Think of it like you're sitting in an armchair. If you gotta shift your weight one way to another, it's like you can move, you just have a lot less, you just can move a lot less. And every bump you go over on a recumbent, you feel that on your back. You don't get to absorb that with your body. the way that you can on a bike, where you can stand up and use your knees to absorb the bump. So yeah, that's one challenge, just the actual control of the bike. But also, the bikes that I used to ride in the winter were bikes that I got used for less than $100 typically, or maybe I even found them in the garbage. My Green Machine and my Rally Sport. My Rally Sport I paid, I think, $95 for. My original Green Machine I found in the garbage. My Green Machine 2 I bought, I think, $45 maybe. They were basically, you know, junk bikes, or a beater bike you'd call it. And you know, you just ride it through the weather, realizing that the bike's going to break down over time, and when it finally, you know, has seen the end of it, you just, you know, salvage off what you want to keep, and the rest of it is disposed of or recycled. That was Shepherd Avenue we just crossed there. Shepherd Avenue East. The road I'm on now is called Shaughnessy. We're heading north once again. So yeah, that's fine and good for a bike that you paid a small amount for, and it's for, you know, bikes that there's just many of out there. Like, there's no shortage of cheap department store bikes that people buy thinking they're going to ride, and then they don't ride them, and then they're just sitting there, and then they either throw them out or they sell them cheap. There's no shortage of them like that, right? But recumbent bikes are a little bit of a different story. There aren't really any low-end recumbent bikes. If you're going to buy a recumbent, they don't make large volumes of them. The parts on them are very unique and special. So a lot of recumbents are, you know, handmade or just made in small quantities. So that means that the labor is expensive. A lot of recumbents are made in developed countries, the United States and Europe, where labor is not cheap. So as a result, most recumbents are pretty expensive. And if you find a recumbent that you like, there's not a whole lot of other ones out there like it. So if you're going to ride through the winter and get it all covered in salt and sand and leave it out in the freezing rain to get water into every crevice and crack of it, when that bike starts to break down, you know, getting replacement parts for it is going to be a challenge. And if you eventually want to replace it as a whole, good luck doing that, because you know, that bike that you have, you know, it might not be manufactured anymore. All of my recumbent bikes that I've owned since I switched to recumbents have been used recumbents. And you know, there's certainly not the same selection of used recumbents, at least in Toronto where I live, compared to what there are of conventional bikes. Conventional bikes, you go on to our local listing service, Kijiji, which is basically the same as Craigslist, but it's what we use here in Canada. You go on there, and there's, in Toronto at least, there's hundreds of used bikes posted every single day. And for recumbents, there might be maybe 2 new bikes. Maybe not even that. It depends on the time of year. But yeah, let's take 2 new bikes per month that are posted that are recumbent bikes. At least in the time when I've been watching. About 2 new bikes come on the market, in the used market, for recumbents every month. And that includes tricycles, recumbent trikes. So, you know, you buy a bike that you love, it's used, you want to buy that same bike again, you could be waiting several years before that kind of bike pops up, or you might have to travel far away. In fact, of the 4 used recumbents that I bought, none of them actually even came from Toronto. So I guess in my estimation of 2 per month, I'm actually talking about of all of Ontario. I had to do some traveling to get my bikes. I guess I should mention the bike that I'm riding now. It has been, featured in a lot of my videos when I've been riding around, rural Ontario on it. But I never actually made a video when I first got it to say, hey everyone, look at my new bike, which is something that I've done in the past. So the story with this bike is that, well, let's just start from the beginning of the recumbent. So the very first recumbent bike that I bought, when I first discovered that I had these hand-wrist problems and wanted to try something, was I found an underseat steering bike for sale, which actually was in the, rural Ontario, and I can't actually remember where exactly it was, but it was way out in the country, 2 or 3 hours from the city. And I liked the bike, and the guy in the ad said would consider delivery to Toronto. I went, okay, well that could work, because I don't have very easy access to a vehicle to be able to travel out to the country just to go and look at a bike that I might buy or not buy. So anyways, I just said, you know what, if you sell it, whatever, but if you're going to come to Toronto, bring it with you the next time you come, and I'll take a look at it and see what I think. So that ended up taking about 2 or 3 months before we actually finally came to Toronto. But anyways, I ended up buying that bike, my first recumbent, the Lightning Tailwind Micro, made in Swanton, Ohio. And so I tried the bike, and I was able to ride it. It was underseat steering, long wheelbase. It had 2 20-inch wheels, front and back. And I was able to ride it, and I was amazingly able to feel like I could ride, very long distances without any pain in my hands or wrists. I thought, wonderful. But the problem was the bike was too small for me. I put the seat in its farthest back position, and my knee would not fully extend when I was riding. And as a result, I was getting pain in my hands. Sorry, not pain in my hands. No pain in my hands or wrists, but I was starting to get pain in my knees. And I had never had problems with riding bikes and pain in my knees before. And so I knew that it was the bike that was the problem. I didn't want to aggravate that problem further, so I didn't really ride that bike, as much as I had intended to first ride it, because it was too small. So I, rode it occasionally, just short distances, and just continued looking online to see what else would pop up for sale. And then my gold linear popped up. It was for sale, not in Toronto, but in Ottawa. And this is right around June of last year, 2017. So I've been riding the Lightning a little bit. And, it had been working for me for my wrists and hands, but not for my knees. And, but I love being able to ride. And with the summer coming, I just really wanted to ride. So even though this bike was for sale in Ottawa, I said, all right, well, I'm going to go to Ottawa to buy this bike, or at least to look at this bike, because I want a bike that works for me, that's going to work for me on all fronts, for my hands and wrists, and for my knees. Just crossing Finch Avenue now, Finch Avenue East. We're getting pretty close to the northern end of North York now. The road I'm on is called Brams Avenue. So yeah, this bike popped up and it seemed like just what I wanted. It was, you know, long wheelbase. Basically, it was the same as it had many of the aspects of my Lightning Tailwind that I liked, but in the areas that I didn't like my Tailwind, it was improved. It was a, you know, bigger bike. The seat could go back way further. The back wheel was not 20-inch. It was a full 700C back wheel, which was important and I thought was good because the gearing ratios on that Lightning were not ideal because it couldn't shift very high and it couldn't shift very low. So with a regular, you know, regular setup for back wheel size, a regular, you know, combination of speeds of sprockets gave pretty good ratios. Anyway, so I was glad to have a more conventional drivetrain system, and also the seat on that Linear was, I think I measured about 6 inches, probably more than that, higher off the ground. So when you're riding in the city, you want to be visible. And with that Tailwind, I was just, you know, with the little wheels and everything, I was just sitting right on the ground pretty much. And, you know, coming around a corner or something like that with parked cars, you're not very visible. I mean, I used a flag and I made the light bar thing that I showed in the video, but I just wanted to be a lot higher and higher off the ground, and well, the Linear was higher off the ground. So it seemed like the perfect bike, so I made the trip to Ottawa and I purchased that bike. And now, interesting story on that too, because I am telling stories here. When I was going to Ottawa, like Ottawa's, you know, it's another city in Canada. It's probably more like 5 hours drive to get to. Just turning here onto McNichol Avenue. Let's say five hours to get to Ottawa. 5 hours each way. Anyways, so you look on Kijiji, and yeah, this bike was for sale in Ottawa. It was exactly what I wanted, but it's quite a long drive to go. You know, let's say I got there and tried the bike and found out that it had, you know, some kind of issue with it that the seller hadn't told me about, and like it wasn't something that I'd want to buy. Then I'd be like, okay, I drove for 10 hours to see a bike and I didn't even buy it. Like, it would just been a waste of a trip. However, if you look on Kijiji, Ottawa seems to be a hot spot for recumbent bikes. Ottawa is a very cycle-friendly city, or at least recreationally. There's a lot of cycling that goes on in Ottawa. There's a lot of trails and, you know, pathways and things. So anyways, lots of interesting cycling there. So lots of recumbents in Ottawa. So on the used market, there was, you know, the bike that I was going there to buy, but there was also maybe 4 or 5 others. As I said, they only post about 2 per month in the whole province of used recumbents, but you know, they don't always sell. So they sit on Kijiji for you know, 6 months sometimes without selling. So there was, you know, a bunch of them that had all piled up there, and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to go to Ottawa, I should at least, you know, make some appointments to see some of these other bikes too, because, you know, what if this bike that I'm going all the way to Ottawa for ends up being a dud? Then I'll have driven 10 hours to go and look at a bike, so that I can get a bike that I can ride that's going to fix all my problems, but it might not even work. So I was like, okay, let's make a couple other appointments. So anyways, I made another appointment to see this other bike, which is a burly Spider. It's coming down this nice hill, down to a valley here. Well, anyway, my camera here is just giving me a notification that it's almost out of batteries. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to cut this video a little bit short, but I will continue this ride and these stories on another day. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed joining me on this portion of my ride from the Annex in downtown Toronto up towards the office that I work at now, which is in Richmond Hill. Please leave a comment below and let me know what you thought, and thanks for watching.